Greetings, friends. Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm going to begin as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammam saṅgham namasami. So welcome everyone. And today I'm going to speak about the 10 fetters. I've got the title of this session as The Practitioner's Progress. It's a bit of a riff on the Pilgrim's Progress. It's a beautiful book by John Bunyan, which tells the tale of a pilgrim, a spiritual seeker. Many of you will know this book. Christian, the spiritual seeker, who goes leaves the household life and goes on a long journey, and on the way meets all the hindrances, all the obstacles, all the fetters to liberation, to enlightenment. And it's a particular telling from a particular time and place and tradition, but it's a very beautiful book and story of the spiritual quest. In Buddhism, we have also the roadmaps, we have the geography, we have the guidance, to take us all the way to Nibbana, to enlightenment. And there are many ways in which the Buddha describes this journey for us and points us, towards the true way. And it's very helpful to, even wherever we are on the spiritual path, to consider the different stages and the different obstacles that we meet along the way, so that wherever we are, we can maybe gauge a little bit what we need to work with. What we are working with might become a bit clearer for us, and we may look to, the sense of the obstacles that may not be presenting themselves to us right now, but that are kind of lurking in the background, and that we may find ourselves meeting at some future point in our practice. I speak about future here. These things can happen very instantaneously, but there is a sense of process and progress through time that we receive when we take in these teachings of the Buddha regarding path and stages. So I'd like to read you, first of all, the sutta that I've popped into the chat, suggested reading, Anguttara Nikaya 1013, Samyojana Sutta, which is the clear laying down of the roadmap. So I'd like to invite you, friends, to just listen, give good ear to the Dharma from the Buddha. This is Anguttara 1013. And it is the sutta on the fetters, Samyojana Sutta. There are 10 fetters. What 10? The 5 lower fetters and the 5 higher fetters. What are the 5 lower fetters? They are substantialist view, Sakkaya Ditthi, doubt, Vicikicca, misapprehension of precepts and observances, Silabbata Paramasa, sensual desire, Kamachanda, and ill will, Vyapada. These are the 5 lower fetters. What are the 5 higher fetters? This is the fetters that we meet later in our path of practice, or that become more predominant for us. as the lower fetters are let go of, are seen through. What are the 5 higher fetters? They are desire for rebirth in the realm of luminous form, Rupa Raga. Desire for rebirth in the formless realm, Arupa Raga. Conceit, Mana. Restlessness, Uddhacca. And ignorance, Avijja. These are the 5 higher fetters. And these then are the 10 fetters. A1. So there we have it, friends. There are these 10 fetters, which are, samyojana means with, yoja, it's like a yoke. Yojati is to yoke or to trap, to bind. These are the 10 bindings, the 10 chains that bind us, the ways in which we're constricted, that we're not seeing clearly, that we're enslaved. We're not really in control. We're not really the masters. We are subject to these 10. And even when we feel we're doing what we like, we're just following the dictates of these 10 fetters. And so it's so helpful to see, what are the things that we may be oblivious to, may not be seeing, may not be feeling. Can we search for these? Can we seek these? Can we see how we might be constrained? And it's very interesting, isn't it, friends, that we don't necessarily know that these fetters are binding us. Subjectively, we can feel very comfortable in our bonds, in our prison, as slaves, because of ignorance and habit. So for so long, we've been used to, things being a certain way. And so there's not even the clarity to recognize the situation that we're in, possibly initially. But when we start to practice, we can begin to open to the suffering. And these forms of suffering are what we will meet. So just to speak about them a little bit, the 5 lower and the 5 higher fetters, these are let go of in stages, in groups, as we progress on the path of practice. And Luang Por Sumedho speaks a lot about the first 3 fetters. The first 3 fetters are good to focus on, because these are the most important ones to tear asunder, to gain insight into, to be able to free up from. Once these first 3 fetters are overcome, are seen through, then we are bound for Nibbana. We become a Sotapanna, become a stream enterer. We're no longer subject to the strong currents of conditioning that create so much mayhem in the world around us. We're no longer compelled, by our reactivity. We're no longer overwhelmed by emotion to the extent that we can cause problems for ourselves or others. There's no longer a sense of separation. So the most important fetter to examine is that which is Sakkaya Ditthi. Sakkaya Ditthi, translated as, I think there with Bhante Sujato, a substantialist view or personality view. Sakkaya Ditthi, sa, existing, kaya, body, ditthi, view. The view that there is something here that is lasting, that is separate from everything else. The atta, or the soul, or the essence here that continues through time, through lifetimes. And this is a very strong conditioning that we have. At the time of the Buddha, people had this very same conditioning, and the Buddha really strove to teach anatta, the concept of not self, to try to help people to break this fetter through insight. So we are deluding ourselves in feeling and thinking and behaving as though there is something here that is substantial and lasting. And it's a very painful state, actually, for us to be in, is it not? Because when we hold to a sense of self here, we are separating ourselves off. And so we're subject to many dangers because of this. We may lack empathy, we may lack a sense of fellowship, a sense of connection with other beings. And when that happens, when we're subject to this fetter, when we hold ourselves as separate, this is how it is possible for us to harm others, to kill, to steal, to lie, to deceive and confuse others in that way, to commit sexual misconduct, to intoxicate ourselves, to slip away even for a moment from the Dhamma through intoxication. It's no longer possible, in short, for us to break the 5 precepts when this fetter is seen through. But before it's seen through, any of those things are possible. We will follow inclinations that lead us towards all of these ways of harm. And so it's this sense of a separate self that gives us it's like we're in a bubble, we're in a castle separated from the rest. And we're living our lives in this way, seeing ourselves as discrete entities that therefore, need protection, need all sorts of attention paid to them, and that have to defend themselves against dangers and fears that are all imagined out there. And so we have, all the suffering and the tendency towards unfortunate states of woe. All of this is wrapped up in this delusion of self. And along with this fetter, this first and most important fetter to see through, bound up with it are the other 2 lower fetters that an ordinary person holds to before becoming a stream enterer. We are bound by also vicikiccha, the mind that is agitated, that can be misled, that can be easily distracted, easily pulled away from the path, that is prone to vacillation, that is confused, that is subject to doubt, to not realizing the way forward to real happiness, the path. This fetter is with us as long as we hold to a strong sense of identity. We will have this kind of a mind that is confused, that's steeped in ignorance. So this fetter is the second that binds us. And the third fetter that comes in this group of 3 is Silabbata Paramasa. Sila means precept or virtue or good habit. Bata is a protocol or observance, some sort of rite or ritual. And paramasa means a misunderstanding, not relating in a wise way. So Silabbata Paramasa means it's translated often as the attachment to rites and rituals. It is the delusion that through the ways in which we behave externally, we can find our way to freedom, to enlightenment, to liberation. And this is very much related to the sense of self, because it's the misapprehension that this one can be liberated through behaving in this way or that way. Often these behaviors, these rites or rituals are wholesome. It's just that the relationship with them is obscured by ignorance. There's nothing wrong with keeping sila, keeping precepts. There's nothing wrong with spiritual practices. In fact, they're very helpful on this path of practice, but it's the relationship we have with them, the attitude we have towards them that needs to be seen clearly. We're not trying to liberate this person. Nothing this person does in the way of rites and rituals is going to lead to nibbana. If we can recognize that there are skillful means on the path of practice, but they are not personal, they're not feeding and nourishing a person here. They are ways to let go of the fetters, ways to see through ignorance, ways to let go of suffering. It's ignorance and the suffering that results from ignorance that is to be freed, not the personhood. And so rites and rituals are helpful for sure, but they are to be related to in this way. Skillful means, ways to help us to let go, not to be attached to. And so, friends, these first three fetters, personality view, doubt or the vacillating, agitated mind, and the attachment to rites and rituals, these three are seen through in a person who attains to stream entry. And it happens, we're told, all in one moment. All three fall away together. That is, all three maintain and support one another. So when one of these fetters is seen through, the others also fall away. And it's often the sense of self that's the leader here. So when we can see through that, let go of the belief or the experience of something solid here, lasting through time, that needs to be preserved and maintained and supported and defended. Once we can let go of this, then doubt can fall away. The mind becomes much more peaceful straight away. And the understanding of how to move towards liberation clarifies. And we recognize that it's nothing to do with externals, rites and rituals. It is everything to do with the insight that comes from within, the change of view, the shift of attitude, the opening of the Dharma eye. It's like we step out of prison when these three fetters fall away, and there's a surety, there's a clarity, there's a certainty about path, and that this is the way, this is the only way to liberate the heart. That is through this practice of mindfulness, practice of the Eightfold Path. The Buddha's laid it out for us, the way, and so the faith and certainty and confidence in the Buddha, in the possibility of waking up, and in the awakeness of the mind, that this is the way forward to develop our mindfulness, develop the good qualities, develop the panya, the wisdom, right view, that this is the only way. And everything in the heart mind inclines towards alignment with this. There's nothing that is left out. There's no doubt that can arise. There's no possibility of falling back to any sense, pervading or even subtle sense that there is something here that is substantial. There's a me, there's a mine, there is a myself. This is the first stage of enlightenment. There are 7 more fetters that present themselves or become more apparent, become more of an obstacle for us, a clear obstacle for us. They're there in the background for everybody until one is free from these fetters, but they're not glaringly obvious. They may not even be seen at all until one has entered the stream. And then with this clarity and the natural inclination towards freedom that a Sotapanna has, then these fetters start to really present themselves. And the next two fetters are Kamachanda, sense desire, and Vyapada, ill will, this push and pull, this, that which takes us away from contentment, takes us away from peacefulness, the arising of wanting and not wanting. This then is the work of a person who's entered the stream. It's a work for all of us. We can all be very mindful of desire and aversion. We can use these as objects of our meditation. We can observe these throughout our lives, friends, can't we? We can be, in our day-to-day lives, very careful, very vigilant, looking out, paying attention to the uprising of anything that's not peaceful and contented right here. Any pulling, any movement towards something, any aversion, any leaning away from experience. And this is a workout because these fetters are powerful. These forces have been with us for a very, very long time. We have been subject to these forces. We have been enslaved by them for so very long. So we are really immersed in this field of following desire and also following the aversion that's pushing away reality. So we have to be very courageous, and vigilant to keep present when we are feeling impelled to move towards or move away from anything whatsoever, when strong emotions arise, when strong wishes arise, when there's reactivity in the mind, we want to be honing in on that and paying attention to how that feels in this moment. And how it feels is painful, whether it's desire or aversion, isn't it? Uncomfortable for us when we really pay attention. So instead of following the habit of getting what we want, getting away from what we don't want, let's cultivate this willingness to stay steady, to flow in the stream of the Sotapanna, to stay mindful, be willing to face the suffering and to thereby recognize the dukkha, the suffering here, recognize the arising and passing, the changeability of these impulses, that they come and go and that we do not have to be enslaved by them any longer. And this process takes as long as it takes, but slowly these fetters of desire and aversion are gradually worn away. And we can really take heart because there's a beautiful sutta in Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha describes this process of freeing ourselves up from the fetters. And he speaks about the first three fetters as like a mountain for us. The sense of self, the doubt and the agitation of mind and the wrong seeing of path that result from this personality view. These three fetters he describes as like the extent of a mountain for us. Well, when we can let go of that sense of self or seriously work with letting go of me and mine, consider not self whenever a sense of permanence here arises, a sense of ownership arises. If we can do this, then what's left when those first 3 fetters fall away, he compared to like a piece of dirt under his fingernail. He said to the people with him, which is bigger, this mountain over here or this piece of dirt under my fingernail? And he then compared the mountain to the first 3 fetters and the piece of dirt under the fingernail to the work that has to be done once those fetters are let go. It's not a lot by comparison. However, desire and aversion are deep rooted in our hearts and minds. And so great patience is required in order to keep working with them as wave after wave of reactivity manifests for us. As we continue to practice with these fetters, they weaken. And the point comes where the second stage of attainment, of enlightenment, arises. That is Sakadagami, the once returner. So the mind that is very freed, it's much less inclined to give in to desire or aversion. It's much more able to see these fetters, to feel the constriction of them, and to throw them off bit by bit, to ease our way out of them. But it's only in the third stage of enlightenment, the anagami, the non-returner, that one can finally be free from these strong energies of desire and aversion. The 4th and 5th fetters fall away for the anagami, the non-returner. What these terms mean, the sakadagami, the once returner, is a person who has a mind that's very subtle, very peaceful, and cannot continue in the stream of suffering in samsara for too much longer. And any continuation of that mind heart can only take place in the higher realms of existence. There's no possibility of experiencing the hell realms, the animal realms, the ghost realms, just as the Sotapanna is also free from unfortunate consequences, free from an unwholesome future. So the Sakadagami is also free, but there's a lot less work to be done. There's more of an inclination towards higher realms of existence than the human, and to clarity, path unfolding. And the anagami, the non-returner, can only be reborn. This mind, on the death of the body, can only come back one more time in a very high realm, the Sudawasa. There are 5 different realms. It can only take rebirth in that place, and from that place liberation is inevitable. And so there's this process of refinement where the trajectory of the mind heart is more and more subtle and short-lasting. And so coming back to the anagami, this is a person who's let go of all 5 lower fetters. So the desire and aversion have also fallen away. Such a person cannot be, provoked in any way, can't be drawn in any way. There's no more desire. There's no more push and pull. There's no possibility of falling away from that state. Each of the stages of enlightenment are permanent in the sense that there's no going back. Once these fetters have fallen away, there's no possibility for them to re-arise. Even at this very refined, attained state, the non-returner, the anagami, there are still 5 fetters left. We may feel, friends, that this is something beyond us, but actually we can consider all 10 fetters, not just the first 3, not just the first 5, but all 10, because they're all there for us. It may be that the first 3 fetters, this personality view, this holding to self, is binding us very tightly, and we're like in a cocoon of self. We're like in a bubble. The awful sense of separation and loneliness that we may experience. It's like we're cocooned. But as the first three fetters fall away, there's a bit more space to move. And as we work with desire and aversion, we have a little bit more lightness of being. There's more possibility of experiencing very peaceful states. As the fourth and fifth fetters fall away and we're free from desire and aversion, there's a lot more space. The mind is very subtle. There's no hindrances to speak of. So there's every possibility for such a mind to dwell in the jhana, in states of great peace, great equanimity. Realization of reality is there for us, but there are still 5 more fetters. And so we can consider that these 5 fetters that may seem very irrelevant to us or out of reach because we haven't attained these high stages of attainment. We're not a Sakadagami, we're not an Anagami. Nevertheless, these would comprise like the walls of the prison. Like we're still confined, and we can still consider this way in which we're confined. And so the next fetters, the 6th and 7th fetters, are the attachment to higher states of mind, to rupa and arupa loka, to the jhana, to peaceful states, either embodied or disembodied. And the translation in the sutta is like referring to different realms of existence. We can recall rupa raga, arupa raga, desire for rebirth in the realm of luminous form, desire for rebirth in the formless realm. But actually, in this very lifetime, we can experience, there's the possibility of experiencing the rupa loka, arupa loka, the jhana, a form where we experience great bliss, great rapture, great peace, great equanimity, and then the formless realms can also be experienced. Infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception. And we may, if we experience these very peaceful states in our meditation practice, we may incline towards them strongly. And here we can learn that these are also fetters for us. We can recognize there are stages on the path that may feel very supportive and helpful as we're quietening the mind. We're beginning to experience more peace. The mind is less stressed, less agitated, less fixated on this and that, less inclined toward the hindrances, less obstructed. We may recognize that these states are something to lean towards because they are like a peaceful resting place, an abiding place, and also can be a place of insight for us. But as we progress on the path, we can start to recognize that these too are binding us. It's not the states themselves, but it's the inclination towards them. There's a very subtle desire that needs to be let go of. So these comprise the 6th and 7th fetters. These sublime states of mind are also to be disidentified with, not inclined towards, we don't want to allow them to hook us, to feel compelled to experience them again and again, to make much of them. They too are to be let go of. And the final 3 fetters to consider, when all else is let go of, even the most blissful, subtle pleasures, the most sublime pleasures are also let go of. These heavenly states of mind, these Brahma realm minds. What's then left, what has to be seen through, is a very subtle form of conceit, the eighth fetter, the udacha, the restlessness. There's very subtle movement in the mind, the ninth fetter, and avijja, ignorance, the 10th fetter. And there is another triad for us, friends, of the state of mind that is unable to rest, it's unable to be still, it's moving, questing, seeking, agitated in a very subtle way with a very refined sense of self or conceit or something holding together, and it is obscured by ignorance. I often think, when I consider these three fetters, of Ajahn Mun's biography. It's this incredible account that Ajahn Mun gave of his enlightenment experience. So the moment when he let go of the anagami mind and became fully liberated, became an arahant, he describes it in great detail. He observed the mind that was circling round and round and round, incessantly, rapidly, with great velocity, seeking and searching and agitating around something. And he couldn't quite see how to let go of this movement of the mind that was circling around a very subtle sense of self. Something still left that was constellated, that was holding together. And at the moment came when the mind stopped. This questing stopped. That very subtle mana, that very subtle conceit fell away. And so ignorance fell away. And so these three fetters were broken through. And there was absolutely nothing left obscuring the view. There was absolutely no more fettered, bound, imprisoned, samsaric existence left. So these last three fetters, a very subtle sense of search, sense of restlessness, sense of something, described as like the smell, the fragrance of the clean laundry. The sotapanna is like a person with fresh laundry. The clothes have been cleaned. There's no more dirt left. And then the process of continuing along the path, it's like there's freshness, there's cleanliness, but there's still the lingering aroma of the dirt that was there previously. It's just a very slight, quite a pleasant smell, but nevertheless, it's due to the last little fragments of self that are left. And for the anagami, there's still this fragrance of self to work with. For the arahant, that has gone. So I've attempted to explain these 10 fetters. And there's so much here to contemplate, friends, and to consider, and to bring the fetters in for each one of us to see, what does that mean for me? How do I experience that? Am I experiencing that in any way? We may not have a sense of the more subtle, final 5 fetters. We may not experience much peace in our practice, but on the other hand, we may have some understanding through investigation of what these fetters might mean for us. And the most important, as I said earlier, is to consider, is there a sense of self here? The very first fetter of personality view. Is there something here? is there a sense of a continuous form, a life, a history, and a future? Do we find ourselves inclining towards cogitating around my life, my future, my plans, my past? How is it going to be? Do we worry about the future in relation to this one? And it's not to berate ourselves if we do, if we find ourselves constantly thinking about this one and what's happened to me in the past, where I came from and where I'm heading, and how's it going to be and how can I make it good? Not to berate ourselves for these thoughts, but to see that this is all agitation. It's all forms of doubt. It's all coming from a sense of separation, of having something here that is a lasting and perpetual burden that we're carrying. And so to work with this, to be willing to just consider, oh, there's this fetter of personality view. I'm laboring under this attachment. I'm bound up here. Let me consider the Buddha's teachings. Let me continue to practice. And maybe feel what underlies these thoughts, these obsessions around my life, my past and my future. Come to the place of embodiment and recognize, how does that feel? And is it pleasant or unpleasant? Is it wholesome or unwholesome? Is it serving me or not? If there's suffering here, then there will be the inclination to let go of that suffering. But first, the suffering must be felt. And so to open to these fetters, to investigate our sense of self, when it comes up for us, how it manifests for us, to consider the mind that's constantly running around, and to help it to settle by practicing the Eightfold Path, letting go of selfish concerns, developing in virtue, developing our meditation practice, considering the teachings of the Buddha, growing in wisdom, helping ourselves to work with these ways in which we're deluded, and recognition of rites and rituals, value, and where we might get caught up in them and give them too much importance, identify with them, or use them as a way of bypassing the work that needs to be done. Let's use rites and rituals, spiritual practices, our meditation practice, our recollections of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, our pujas, and so forth. Let's use them to focus our attention on the work that needs to be done, to develop mindfulness, to be willing to let go of the sense of self when it arises, to recognize anicca, anatta, dukkha. Constant change here. Nothing lasting, nothing I can hold on to and make me and mine. That's just suffering. To keep developing these insights, and so we can find our way to ease the bonds, friends, loosen the bonds, slowly but surely extricate ourselves from the cocoon and work with desire and aversion. Really focus on reactivity whenever it arises. Nothing else is important. There's nothing we need to do at those moments. The most important thing is to be present for how it is when we're pushing and pulling, when we're fighting reality, to make that awareness of those fetters of desire and aversion, to make that our priority. And so we can work through, attenuate those bonds, loosen the fetters gradually. And the final 5 fetters to really study, consider, see ways in which we can relate to them, and recognize that there are these stages of enlightenment. There are these very clearly mapped out ways in which we experience the letting go and the lightening of our hearts and minds, so we can take a lot of comfort, a lot of strength from this clarity. The Buddha hasn't left anything out. It's all clearly mapped out for us. And that is so supportive for us, both for ourselves and for helping one another also on the path of practice. Let's be aware of the fetters. Let's remember them, and let's look for them and be willing to focus on them where they arise, where they're apparent to us, and let go of them. And so incline our hearts ever more towards the ultimate peace of Nibbana. Ayya. Thank you for your kind attention and patient listening. I'm going to check on the chat, invite you to put down any comments, reflections, references, or questions, so we can have a bit of a collective sharing now on this topic of the 10 fetters. Welcome. Yeah, thank you for being here live. Gregory, Elenice, Maria, Manal, Heike, Madeline, Sue, Jayanta. And right, I'm going to read out. Thank you, Sud. Sud has said a few things here. Excellent. Recently, I was listening to a sutta that talked about disciples of Buddha and non-disciples of Buddha, and difference between them being, even if they're born into these high heavens, the non-disciples fall down later into lower states, but disciples of the Buddha will gain enlightenment from that state itself. Is it pointing towards perhaps at earlier stages being okay to be attached to these high states so that we let go of these lower tendencies? But of course, with knowing at the back of your mind that perhaps the final goal is still Nibbana. Please let me know if I am not understanding this clearly. Thank you. Thank you, Sud. Let me just skim through that again to try and take it in fully. So, disciples of the Buddha and non-disciples. Non-disciples can also be born into high heavens, yes. They will fall down later into lower states, but disciples will gain enlightenment from that state. Is it okay to be attached to? I think what comes to me as a response here, Sud, is that there are beings who are not disciples of the Buddha, or who are not on the spiritual path, not giving priority to letting go, to development of insight, to the Eightfold Path, in every different plane of existence, apart from the 5 planes of existence where the once returners dwell, the Suddhavasa planes of existence. This is what we're told in the Pali Canon. Any other plane of existence, there are beings who may be practicing for liberation, and there are beings who may not. The practitioner, the person who's following the path of practice to liberate the heart, once these attainments, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, Arahant, have been realized, there is no falling back. So for other beings who may be in fortunate states, living in Brahma realms, Deva realms, in heavenly realms, very subtle existences, they will be there because of the result of good karma, wholesome karma, but not necessarily because they have insight into path. And so they can cycle around samsara and will cycle around samsara endlessly. This is what we've all been doing for so long. When we are fortunate enough to meet these teachings, to have the inclination, to have the intention for liberation, then we come onto a path that has a inevitably forward inclination toward nibbana after a certain point. So we need to practice, friends, to break through to the realization of stream entry, of sotapanna, in order to be safe, one could say, from the danger, the risk of falling back into less fortunate states where practice is not easy. It's virtually impossible to practice for liberation in lower states than the human realm. The animals are too busy surviving. The hungry ghosts, the angry ghosts are caught up in extreme intensity, and there's no space for contemplation of that state. And in the hell realms, there's pure suffering, overwhelming suffering, and so there's no possibility to practice. And so, honestly, until we have let go of the sense of self in its more gross aspects, the sense of continuity, if we've not taken on the understanding, the concept of anatta, of not self, we're not working with that really seriously, then there is this danger, that we're still caught up in samsara. And there's a kind of inevitability to the cycling from realm to realm. It's like a roller coaster ride, is it not? It's from high to low. That's the way it goes in samsara. Even the Buddha, as the Bodhisattva, in previous lives, before the human birth, where he became the Buddha, he was going from the highs to the lows in terms of the 31 realms of existence. So until we break through to the realization of stream entry and let go of that sense of self and all the doubt and all the misunderstanding that goes along with it, we are still in danger of falling away from the path altogether. Once we've entered the stream, there's no possibility that we can lose that understanding, that insight. That insight carries through and the work continues, and there's an inevitability that there will be the breakthroughs that are required to reach the second and third and then the final stage of enlightenment. So I hope that sort of answers your comment there, Sud. Thank you. Hi, Maga, Carol, Mongol, Maitreyi, and Elenise. Good to see you here. And I've got a comment from Madeline. Thanks, Madeline, who says, I'm really working with aversion and with a daily practice of metta, beginning to feel I'm getting there. That is wonderful, Madeline. Sadhu, sadhu. And as you very helpfully actually point out here, the remedy, if we're dealing with a lot of aversion, is to help ourselves by bringing in kindness. And if we're working with a lot of desire, let's bring in the wisdom of anicca. All things are changing. Whatever it is we're desiring, soon enough will be dust. Let's remember that. Or breaking reality into its elements to get us out of that heat of desire, to cool us down. So there are these remedies for the fetters of desire and aversion, and we can bring them in, and how helpful it is to do that. In fact, every fetter has its remedy, you could say. Let's consider. Personality view has the remedy of anatta, to bring in the concept, and frequently, often consistently remember the Buddha's teachings on not self, which helps us to incline towards selflessness. And practicing selflessness, practicing service, putting aside our own interests, putting aside our needs, and focusing on the needs and interests of others. This is a way to really help us to open to the understanding that there's nothing here that we need to hold on to, that we can hold on to. But when we do make much of this personality, this personhood, this body, this form, we're just rolling around in suffering. And so anatta is the remedy for personality view, to bring in the concept of anatta and to behave selflessly, to let go of selfishness. The remedy for doubt is to take in the Buddha's teachings and to meditate, to come out of our heads, to stop vacillating, to stop obsessing, to stop allowing the mind to run around, the wild monkey mind. So to meditate, to develop focus, samadhi, stillness. That is a remedy to help us to work with that fetter of doubt. The fetter of rites and rituals, the unskillful use of rites and rituals, the belief that they're going to liberate us in some way. The remedy for this is the skillful use of rites and rituals, to use rites and rituals if we have that inclination, but to recognize their actual use, which is to help to encourage us in the practice, in our development of mindfulness, in practicing the Eightfold Path. Another remedy, actually, that just springs to mind for doubt, for the vacillating mind, is, of course, faith. So to bring in, to develop saddha, to take in the Buddha's teachings and to let ourselves practice and gain confidence in the teaching, so that we can incline more and more fully to the recognition that this is the way. This is what we want to spend all our time and energy doing, is practicing for liberation. So saddha is another remedy there. So I've spoken about, and Madeline, thank you for bringing this in, remedy for desire being wisdom, anicca anatta dukkha, insight, remedy for aversion, loving kindness. Bring in kindness. Kindness for this one, perception, and kindness for that perception. And that loving kindness breaks through the delusion of separation and softens and alleviates and helps us to work with aversion. The remedy for attachment to the sublime states of mind, the jhana, the rupa jhana, the form, the experience of jhana with form, and the experience of jhana beyond form, the purely mental states of, or insights of jhana. What is the remedy for these? The remedy for these is to recognize their value, recognize their helpfulness, and be willing to let go of them when the time is right. So not to identify with them, and not to incline towards them with any desire, or to see the desire that inclines towards states of bliss and peace and well-being and the insights of the arupa jhana, and to work with that desire and be willing to let go. What is the remedy for conceit? It is to see if we can smell that fragrance, that subtle self that might still be there. The remedy for the restless mind, to keep developing insight and be willing to let go of that movement, to be willing to stop seeking, to stop giving in or feeding the fascination with becoming, with being. And the remedy for the ignorance is vidya, the knowledge that arises through this practice. Those last three fetters are so interesting to consider, how it is, how we might experience them, and how we can detect them. So I really invite you to give much time for this. Don't think they're out of reach. Don't think they're not relevant for us. They are. And the investigation of these teachings can be so helpful to encourage us on the path of practice. Thanks a lot, Madeline, for bringing that in and encouraging this springboard, looking at the opposites of the fetters or the remedies for the fetters. Quite an interesting exercise. I'm sure you can all think of other remedies. I invite you to do so. Maitreyi says, I'm going a little bit over time, but I want to meet all your comments and questions, friends, if you're happy to linger. Maitreyi, how will be subtle feelings, Ayya? Well, I would say that each of these stages and states and experiences is to be experienced by each one of us for ourselves. This is the only way that we can progress on the path, is to actually recognize, this is again the fetter of rites and rituals, to be let go of, is to see that the path must unfold and be known and be experienced for each person by themselves, internally, through insight, through experience. So we speak about things and we take in the teachings and we, explore them, and then we want to apply these teachings to our own felt experience. This mind and heart, for as long as it feels like something here to practice, we can say that this entire field of practice is experiential and unfolding for each person. So these subtle states are to be experienced by each one of us and arise as a result of dealing with the more gross, heavy, coarse states and fetters. In this case, we're talking about fetters. We work with the coarse and the gross and the really obvious suffering, and then as we let go and let go and let go, we come to more subtle states, which are also, when investigated with insight, can be seen to be agitating, suffering, uncomfortable, actually something to let go of also. And we come to this ever more subtle appreciation of suffering, therefore. And that is something we can't push and force. Just work with what we've got. Work with what experiences you're having now and see if you can find the suffering within those states, and thereby the natural inclination, let's go of those states. We're letting go of suffering gradually. We're moving from ignorance towards understanding gradually. I hope that's helpful. And that's what comes to me in response to your comment there. Thanks, Maitreyi. Okay, we got just two more, I think, that I can deal. And I'm going to have to be very brief. Sud says, also, can we break these fetters in different order? For example, breaking away from ill will completely, but then not being able to break away from sakyaditi or sensual desire, etc. That's a really good question. No, actually, interestingly, these fetters are in a certain order. There's the triad of the first three fetters that are the first impediments, the first most coarse aspects of ignorance that are to be seen through. They are seen through first. It can be that from that point of stream entry, it can be momentary, just mere moments before the next fetters are seen through. On the other hand, it could be many lifetimes of practice with desire and aversion before they are fully let go of. But there is a certain order here. Because the first three fetters are far more gross, they're far more heavy, substantial in a way until they're not. So the first thing we need to work with is the abiding sense of self. And having seen through that, then we will notice that there is an enormous tendency and conditioning towards desire and aversion. It's basically an inability to settle with the way things are. It's a mind that's still agitated, but in this particular way. And then desire and aversion, once they fall away, one becomes an anagami, a non-returner. Then this is the time to meet the other fetters fully, because it's then that we can start to really let go of the desire for higher states of mind, more subtle states of mind, more peaceful states, and that we can start to see this very, very subtle, the last three triad, the last three fetters, very, very subtle restlessness of mind due to a circling around something, which is the lingering conceit, the lingering holding together of something here, and the ignorance that is obscuring our ability to let go of that. And eventually that is let go of. There is an order, in short, and that is the order. But don't take my word for it. Investigate and see how it is for you, Sud. Thank you. And finally, dear friends, Elenice says, I really appreciate your teachings. Thank you, Elenice. I try. It is very important to understand the connection between loneliness, defensive responses, and depression with the I and mine approach. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Elenice. It's very interesting to point this out. Loneliness, defensive responses, and depression. Yeah, they're all circling, are they not, around a sense of self. And how painful it is, particularly, I would say loneliness and defensiveness are very much bound up with this fetter of Sakaya Ditti, of having a self, because that is what we have to defend. And that is what is held to be, is seen to be, felt to be separate from other beings, from the rest, from all of it. And that is so excruciating. I think depression actually is something that can, elation and depression may linger actually beyond the insight that lets go of that fetter of Sakaya Ditti. So a stream enterer, even a I think even a once returner or a non-returner may experience more subtle states of discomfort, such as depression or elation. I would say until perhaps the Sakadagami, perhaps not the Anagami, but for the Sakadagami, there's still desire and aversion, you see. And so there can still be disappointment, maybe low energy, over energized sometimes by the states of mind that arise for us. It could be so. But yeah, defensiveness and loneliness, how painful and how much they are bound up with a sense of separation, a sense of self, sadhu. So thank you, friends, for your patient listening. Let's finish with 3 sadhus, honoring, respecting, and with great gratitude to our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.